walks around the locker room naked and talks to you with his dong just kind of flapping around. He'll put his hand on your shoulder and look you right in the eye while asking you some like super intense personal question. Will you not have life? What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today, as you can see, we are doing something a little bit different. Today, we are doing a rock and metal subgenre tier list and rank all the many different subgenres of rock and metal, from easycore to dungeon synth to new school, old school death metal. That's a thing? Yes, that's a thing. But before we get into it, first, if you haven't yet, please subscribe and turn on notifications as well. A lot of people have told me that they're not getting notifications. Also, I want to thank Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Raid is a turn-based RPG with kind of a darker, grittier feel than you might expect from a mobile game. One big thing you'll notice is the 16 different factions that you can choose from, like barbarians, lizardmen, and orcs, among many others. I personally like the dark elves because they look kind of emo. They're like regular elves if they shopped at Hot Topic and listened to Motionless in White. And also, they're all about money, getting that bag. Challenge yourself to your edge in the ongoing tournaments, compete against the entire raid community while fighting in the Spider's Den, Ice Golem's Peak, the Almighty Fire Knight, or the Notorious Dragon in order to win awesome rewards and rare artifacts. I personally like geeking out on all the options for customizing your champions. Hexweaver is my personal favorite champion. I've used her since I got the game last year. And you can go super deep with equipping all kinds of different artifacts, upgrading each one of them, as well as upgrading the champion's level and skills and more. And best of all, it's free. Free to play on iOS, Android, and PC. And they're also offering a bonus that's available only to new players and for the next 30 days. If you go to the video description, click on the special links, and if you are a new player, you will get 100,000 silver and an epic champion named Jotun. And once you log in, all this treasure will be waiting for you right here. So good luck, and I'll see you there. And with that out of the way, let's get into the tier list. This list is not just what I personally do and don't like. I am ranking them based on 3 criteria. Number 1, the first thing is the degree of commercial success associated with the subgenre. This is not all that matters, of course, but I think if you're selling 10 million records, that's probably a sign that you did something right. And second, how culturally relevant or influential the genre is. And lastly, my own personal opinion of how good it is. So if you want to be the guy who gets all huffy in the comments like,
"Oh my god, I can't believe you didn't put blackened post-industrial ska higher."
Well, it's a free country, you can do what you want, but my advice would be maybe don't be that guy. Alright, so first of all, the classic flavor of metalcore like Killswitch, As I Lay Dying, Shadows Fall, all that kind of stuff. Metalcore 1.0 as I'm calling it. I'm gonna put that on the A tier because these bands sold a shitload of records. I think Killswitch has like 4 Billboard top 10 albums or something like that. And it was probably the entry point into heavy music for a huge portion of people watching this video.
Is that metalcore? Hell yeah, brother, turn that fucking shit up. Metalcore, woo!
All right, next up, Crabcore. I'm gonna put Crabcore on the B tier. This one hurt. It physically hurt me to put Crabcore on the B tier. But remember, we're trying to keep this objective. I love this stuff, but realistically, I would say this stuff was not as commercially successful as the OG, like Metalcore 1.0, and I would say probably also not quite as influential, although maybe that will change in the future. But for now, Crabcore goes on the B tier. And next up, thrash metal, which I'm gonna put on the A tier as well. Now, at this point, thrash metal is kind of like your burned out uncle who's on disability for a fake back injury and spends most of his time in his garage working on his custom van, which doesn't run and probably never will, and cornering you with stories about how he saw Iron Maiden in 1984. But I'm telling you, thrash used to be cool. On a commercial level, obviously Metallica is one of the most successful bands of all time. The rest of the big 4 sold a lot of records too. And it's also extremely influential. That thrash style of riffing is the basis of a huge chunk of modern hardcore and metalcore and other genres. And although, like any other subgenre, there's a ton of shitty thrash bands, I would say the best ones like Sepultura, Forced Entry, The Accused, I would say that stuff still holds up. But on the other hand, neo thrash, all those bands who cosplay as like 80s party thrash dudes, I'm gonna put that stuff
on the F tier.
If you enjoy this stuff, that's great. You should like what you like. But if we were being objective, this genre is like one step above a cover band. It's almost like a whole genre of tribute bands.
This Sunday, come see Cotton and Mosh playing the best of thrash metal tonight at Jimmy Z's in Everett. $5 at the door or free admission if you buy a quesadilla.
And by the way, if you were thinking, fuck this guy, fuck this poser, what the fuck does he know about thrash or anything else, and you want to make your own tier list, the Photoshop file for this is in the description, and I encourage you to use it however you want. Make your own. Put it on Instagram or YouTube, whatever you want to do with it. When you post it, tag me, and I will share the best ones. And on the pop punk side of things, some real S tier shit, what I like to call TRL core pop punk. And I call it that because bands like Blink-182 and Simple Plan, Good Charlotte, New Found Glory were on the MTV show TRL all the time, which back then was like the top of mainstream music. And whether you like this stuff or not, I think its place in the S tier is well deserved. These bands sold tens of millions of albums, got millions of kids into the scene, and they're still super influential. And not just to rock bands, but also to this whole generation of emo rappers, which I think really helps the ranking in terms of relevance. Anytime you're feeling old and you just want to go back to being 19 again and having a crush who worked on the girl at the popcorn stand at the mall in Rocky River, Ohio, just press play on some TRL core and it'll take you right back to that moment, standing there across the food court trying to work up the nerve to talk to her but failing and just going home and listening to Dude Ranch instead, to be young again. Okay, but how about some real fucking punk rock, man? Not that shit for posers who shop at the mall. I get a lot of comments like that, and I would put that stuff on the B tier. This could be anything from like Casualties to Discharge to GBH to the Sex Pistols. Although none of these bands were ever particularly commercially successful, punk is without a doubt one of the most influential genres of all time. So you gotta give it some credit there for influence. Although if I'm being honest, I don't think very many of these bands were great on a purely musical level, which is probably why it was never super successful commercially. But that's a whole nother discussion, which I will get into in my upcoming What Killed Punk video. So stay tuned for that. And it's kind of the same story with hardcore, which I'm also putting on the B tier. Whether it's like the Black Flag or Cro-Mags or Madball or Turnstile flavor of hardcore, same kind of story. No hardcore band is ever going to be commercially successful. I mean, that's sort of like the whole basis of the genre, but it is super influential, and not just in terms of music, but I think in terms of culture in general. Like how many CrossFit gyms or yuppie brunch places have a logo that uses that New York hardcore like X kind of design, and they don't even know that it's a hardcore reference? Like they have their hardcore inspired X logo next to a Live, Laugh, Love poster in that brush script kind of font that seems to be the default for inspirational platitude quotes for millennial women. All right, and moving on, I'm gonna put black metal on the C tier. Totally prepared for lots and lots of angry comments about here, but remember the criteria. Number one, black metal is not a commercially successful genre, and that's by design. The whole point of the genre is to do something that was anti-commercial.
Sodomize the holy asshole.
And it is fairly influential, but I would argue that the aesthetic, like the logos and the high contrast black and white photos and all that kind of stuff, is more influential than the actual music is. For example, like every high fashion brand in 2017 that had like a black metal inspired logo shirt. Midwest emo. Definitely gonna hurt some butts here, but Midwest emo goes on the D tier for me. I can already picture the upset commenters looking like a crying Wojak in a thrift store sweater, but I call it like it is. Probably its biggest claim to fame is that it was super influential on emo rappers like Lil Peep, and I do give it credit for that, just not a big genre. And emo rap, I'm gonna put emo rap on the B tier. I love this stuff. There's some pretty big commercial successes here with people like Juice WRLD, Lil Uzi Vert, Lil Peep, but in terms of influence, it's really too early to tell because this stuff is so new. It could go up to A tier or potentially even S tier over time, but for now, B tier it is. And just to show you that this is not about my personal preferences, just to show you that we are being objective here, I'm gonna put easycore in the E tier. If you've watched my other videos, you know that I love easycore. But it really can't justify a higher ranking than this. It really has never been popular. It's not even especially influential. And if we're being honest, 90% of the bands are, you know, not great. But you know what is S tier? Mall Screamo. My Chemical Romance, Taking Back Sunday, Fall Out Boy, The Used, all that kind of stuff. I don't personally like a lot of these bands, a little too whiny for my tastes. But the fact is that these bands were massive mainstream stars, sold a fuckload of merch, and are super influential in both rock and rap, and are finally starting to get some respect as real music. In fact, I give it maybe 2 or 3 years until somebody writes some super pretentious coffee table book about this stuff called like Sugar We're Going Down, The Mall Emo Revolution. Coming this summer from Vice Books. Ska fans are not gonna like this, but I'm putting ska on the D tier.
When you look at me, girl.
Here's how I think of ska. Imagine a Macaulay Culkin movie from like 1991 where a bunch of kids pick on the one annoying little kid that follows them around everywhere to the point where they eventually convince him to jump off a bridge and he dies. And they're like, oh fuck, we killed him. And the rest of the movie is them coping with that. Ska is that annoying little kid that they killed in this hypothetical movie. Yes, super annoying, but you have to remember that he means well. He's not hurting anyone. Yes, it did have some pretty big commercial success in the 90s with the ska-core bands like the Bosstones and Rancid and Goldfinger, and I guess if you want to include No Doubt in there. But there really hasn't been anything since then. It's not particularly influential. There haven't been really any new ideas in the genre in a long time, and so for that reason, I think that a D tier ranking is pretty fair. All right, now skatepunk. I'm gonna put skatepunk on the A tier, although I think you could also justify a B tier ranking. Because although this stuff is not popular now, it definitely was. I mean, The Offspring, NoFX, Pennywise, and Bad Religion sold millions as well. And this stuff was the gateway to punk for tons and tons of kids back in the 90s and early 2000s, and therefore scores high on influence. But that said, the genre has been kind of creatively frozen in time since about 1999, so I think you could also justify a B tier ranking. Unless there's like a comeback next year and emo rappers start wearing puffy Airwalks and Dickies shorts and gas station shirts that say like Big Kenny on them, which actually now that I say it out loud seems totally possible, if not likely. And as for our friend nu metal, I'm gonna put that on the S tier. And I'll be honest with you, I do not really like nu metal for the most part. But I made a pledge to you, and that pledge was to tell the truth. And the truth is that nu metal clearly belongs in the S tier. It's extremely commercially successful, there's tons of platinum Billboard top 10 albums in this genre, and it's also incredibly influential. I mean, if it was a crime to steal riffs from Slipknot, Limp Bizkit, and Linkin Park, then probably 90% of metalcore bands in 2020 would be in handcuffs right now. So whether I personally like it or not, I think you gotta give nu metal credit where it's due. But on the other hand, Djent, my friend, you are going on the D tier. Djent was once a very fresh, new, innovative, creative genre, but that was in like 2010. It's been 10 years, and not much has really changed since then other than what amp sims and drum samples they use. And other than Periphery, I would say none of the bands are particularly big on a commercial level. Yes, the djenty kind of style of riffing has certainly been influential in metalcore and a couple other genres, and it does get some credit for that, but I think Djent is kind of out of gas. Mellow death or melodic death metal, I'm gonna go with C tier here. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of hate this stuff. Melody and death metal, like these two things do not go together in my world. It's just wrong. It's like petting the cat backwards. What kind of a sick fuck would do that? Poor kitty. But bands like In Flames did have some moderate commercial success, and the genre has been super influential, especially on like metalcore, for example. So I do give it some credit there. Now, what about regular old death metal? I love me some death metal. Or am I supposed to call it
Death fucking metal.
I'm gonna go with B tier here. Again, not a lot of commercial success, but super influential on really pretty much every kind of heavy music. From metalcore to deathcore to even pop punk, and also pop culture in general. Just like with black metal, you see tons of graphics outside of death metal referencing the kind of spiky death metal logo kind of thing. And so to me, that is what bumps it up from C to B tier. But what about this thing? What about new school, old school death metal? There is seriously a thing called the new wave of old school death metal. Bands that started like 2 years ago but sound like an Incantation 7-inch from 1991. And it's cool, I guess. I mean, they do it well. I like that sound. But to me, just like with neo thrash, this stuff really is just cosplaying. And so for that reason, I think it belongs on the F tier. And how about its close cousin, grindcore, which I'm going to put on the E tier. Grindcore is obviously not a commercial genre by design, and I do like some of the weirder stuff like Gut and Cock and Ball Torture and Last Days of Humanity, Discordance Axis. But in general, I wouldn't say it's a particularly creative genre or really especially influential compared to the stuff that's higher on the list. Although it did give us the worm rot goat meme, so plus 10 respect for that. And then we have power metal. Oh, power metal. Power metal is like the dude at your gym that's from like Belarus or Ukraine or Bulgaria that's strong as shit, so you kind of respect him for that, but he's always walking around in these like super short shorts, grunting really loud, walks around the locker room naked and talks to you with his dong just kind of flapping around. And just in case it couldn't get any more awkward and uncomfortable, he'll put his hand on your shoulder and look you right in the eye while asking you some like super intense personal question. Why you not have life? Deathcore. You know I love deathcore, especially that 2000s MySpace kind of flavor of it. But the commercial success of the genre has been pretty limited since its peak in, 2013, 2014. And it has been pretty influential. For example, a lot of the newer emo rappers like Fatsy and Lil Lotus were in deathcore bands when they were younger. And actually, now that I mention it, I would bet all the money I have in the bank right now that within the next 12 to 18 months, one of those rappers is gonna bring back the 2008 Brutal Kid look with the fringed hair and stretched ears, white belt and Carnifex shirt. It's only a matter of time, and you know what? I'm here for it. And how about butt rock? There's a lot of confusion as to what I mean when I say butt rock. What I'm referring to is Five Finger Death Punch, Godsmack, Disturbed, all that kind of stuff. This one is an interesting case because these bands are actually like shockingly big. Godsmack still has over 3 million Spotify listeners, for example. God knows who these people are though, because I've never met anybody in my entire life that was a Godsmack fan. So I give them some points for commercial success, but I would say the influence is pretty limited, and I think the music is terrible, so I'm gonna put them in the D tier. And lastly, how about grunge? Grunge is the genre that, for better or for worse, it gave us those kind of vocals. Very unfortunate, I agree, but the fact of the matter is that this stuff was A, super incredibly influential. You've heard before about how Nirvana changed rock overnight, and it's 100% true, they did. And along with Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, they sold a fuckload of records back in the 90s, and actually probably still do. So they score super high on the commercial success criterion as well. And the fact that the grunge look was cool in 1992 when I was in 8th grade and is still cool, well, that says a lot about how influential this stuff is, and in my opinion, justifies its place up here on the S tier. All right, my friends, that does it for this tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments. A reminder, if you think mine sucks and you want to do your own, there's a link to the Photoshop file in the comments if you want to download that. If you make one, tag me. I will share the best ones. Before I let you go, reminder, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Also, make sure you turn on notifications because a lot of people are telling me that they're not getting them from YouTube. That really helps the channel a lot. Also, if you haven't yet followed me on Instagram, I would love it if you do that. There's a link to that in the description as well. And as always, I want to thank the people who support us on Patreon, especially those who support at the True Cult level or above. I am sincerely, truly grateful for your support. It means the world to me. Because of your support, we're able to do a lot of things, but most importantly, the podcast. Because of the patrons, I was able to hire a producer and editor who makes the whole thing happen. She's amazing. If you are interested in supporting on Patreon, there's a link to that in the description. Patrons get every podcast episode a week early. There's an opportunity for me to review your band or YouTube channel or design portfolio or any other kind of creative project you want to send my way. So if that sounds interesting to you, check it out at the link in the description. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.